Bitcoin went from being fringe and the stereotype was a strong community towards anti-government and even a little bit of and now it's going towards, to your point, no, it's like Trump is right there with it, and he's got his own cryptocurrency country, and he's making deals so that he can get money into his cryptocurrency company, and there's going to be a Bitcoin Treasury reserve. Well, what happens when the people look at that and say, oh, so Bitcoin is actually the asset of the corrupt and wealthy and powerful, and they're building their own things, and they're doing their own things, and I'm stuck over here on my decaying infrastructure and the bridge that collapsed and my water isn't clean anymore? Like, how do you solve those things? Because that looks like a head-on collision.
Yeah, I think those two dynamics are going to follow a similar pattern. I think we're going to see probably a proto version of it in the 2026 midterms, but I expect it to be like in full gale in the run up to the 2028 presidential election. I think it'll take on like twin aspects. One is this aspect that both will be, I think, fully internalized and somewhat normalized as either on the one hand, pieces of your portfolio, right, through the Bitcoin ETF, if we're talking about Bitcoin, or just folks will become suffused with using AI that like its immediate presentation to the average American as a piece of technology or piece of their portfolio will be sort of nonpartisan. But I think the sort of outer edge of that technology will be weaponized politically. So like Trump's personal involvement in Bitcoin and related crypto activities will be used as a very potent political cudgel to whack him in 2026, especially in 2028. And the same way, I expect these tech elites that will see their wealth only skyrocket even further from here. It will be seen as essentially a breakaway oligarchic elite that is doing the final stages of post-industrial capitalist extraction. Well, they essentially break the centuries-long fraught but somewhat stable relationship between capital and labor. That capital needed human beings, to work in the fields and then work in the factories and then work in the office farms, right? To sort of churn out the soybeans and the spreadsheets that power industrial capitalism. A big part of that social contract may just be fundamentally voided by drop-in white-collar workers, which, once they get these LLMs plus agentic-based approaches to actually do a lot of white-collar worker, right? Essentially do anything you can do on a computer for the most part, the economic effects and the political effects are going to be extreme. And so I see this kind of bimodal kind of effect coming very quickly. I think 2026 will be a good litmus test to see where the political parties come down on this. It's really, I think, to a certain extent, I think the Republican Party, I think it's already kind of staked out their view of these things. I think it's still a lot of tension under the hood between different camps. But generally speaking, I think they've aligned themselves with basically existing techno capital incumbents as well as the crypto. And I think they decided these are the things that are going to be one sources of, marginal, more campaign contributions, as well as sources of kind of personal enrichment, right? These are the industries of the future. These are the sources of new financial digital capital. And so this is where the existing political elites are positioning themselves. I wonder, like, if it was a Democratic administration, whether a similar marriage would also be happening, right? Like there's a kind of a contingency, which is these exogenous forces, especially in technology change, they have to work with the political apparatus, whoever's in charge. There tends to be this convergence between the political elites and the technological finance elite of any given era. And just whoever's in power is able to kind of maximally accrue the benefit to themselves of these exogenous changes. But then the opposing party sees that as like a threat to their status and the potential sustainability because they need to get funding and they need to get potential kind of strategic supporters in these new industries. So I think the Democratic Party is going through that fight right now, right? Which is how much can we keep whacking the Republican incumbents for essentially doing these crony capitalist deals with essentially very much a strongman style, kind of authoritarian, kind of picking winners and losers and all the CEOs coming to the White House and kind of et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder how much of that is idiosyncratic with Trump versus how much of this is just a function of a democratic capital system going through a hyper capital growth era. Like the rates of return expected for current capital are just so enormous that it just distorts everyone's incentives. That dynamic would be in place kind of regardless of who's sitting in the White House. It's hard, again, it's impossible to turn that counterfactual, but this idea of industrial policy is not new, but this era of like it being done at such a massive scale relative, like Trump just saying we're going to take X% stakes in these companies and we're going to, it's like there's just a phase transition that doesn't seem to be idiosyncratic to him. It seems to be like a systematic issue.